Hey fellow gliders, welcome back. I'm Robert Petito, and in this video we're going to take a look at how to create an interface in your Glide app to allow your users to upload a CSV file that will automatically put that data directly into the Glide database. This is going to save your users a ton of time because the typical experience for adding data into a Glide app is to allow your users to fill out a form which only allows them to add one record at a time. But there are many cases where we want to allow your users to upload data in a bulk experience. Glide doesn't natively have bulk upload. There's only two ways to do that. Either one, through the Glide API, or two, through workflows in order to iterate over rows and add them one at a time via an automation. We'll take a look at both cases and the advantages and disadvantages of each. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. Now, the premise of this app is a work order management system, and I have a bunch of contacts that I want to add to this database, and I want our users to be able to do that themselves, but I don't want to have to only allow them to upload one contact at a time. I want to give them an import contact experience. So the thought is that there'll be a button somewhere over here. It'll say import. They click on it, and in the data editor, it'll boom, import all of their contacts directly into the database. So my table here for my contacts is we have just some basic information like ID number, name, email, phone, address, city, and then I have the row owner. That's who owns this record. If you have a multi-tenant app, you have to have row owners turned on here. So I have will be the app owner, and I have row owners turned on. And then I also have a timestamp so we know when this contact was added. Okay, so again, we could create just a form experience in Glide where they add that record one at a time, but instead what we're going to do is we're going to build out a screen to allow our users to upload a CSV file of data and then run some automations on that CSV file. Okay, so back in our data editor, we're going to add a new table. And it can be just a Glide table. It doesn't need to be a Glide big table or anything. And we're going to call this importer. I'll bring this to the top here. And the first thing I like to do with any table is to delete that name column and then add a row ID column. And the reason why I delete the name column is because actually on the back end, it has the column ID of name and not like Glide's native column naming sequence. So it's kind of strange. So I just like to delete it and start fresh. All right, so I add a row ID column, and then we're going to add a place for them to upload their file. So let's do this. We're going to create a column grouping. We'll call it upload and then file. And this will be just a text column. And we have to make sure that any basic column type that we create here is user specific. Okay, because otherwise, if you have a multi-tenant app, again, users will be overwriting each other's information otherwise. So we have to make sure it's user specific. We hit save. All right, and now let's populate this item with a CSV file. Now, you might want to allow your users to download a template of the CSV that they're planning on uploading. So to do that, just go to the table that you want to import into, in this case, my contacts table, fill it out with some sort of sample or dummy record, and then right click on it and say export. And then it'll export a CSV file, like a one record CSV file with that information. And then you can provide that to your users as a template file. So I've already done that. So back in my importer, I'm going to create a new column grouping called template file. Okay. Let's copy this. This one doesn't need to be user specific. Actually, we don't want it to be user specific because otherwise users won't see it. Only one user will see it. So we want to make sure it's not user specific, but no, we're not going to write to this column, so it's okay. It'll be safe. Now the trick here, it's a little hack in Glide. If you want to be able to upload a file directly into the data editor, what you do is you change the type to image, because the image basic column type is the only one that lets you double click it to upload something. And yeah, it's expecting you to upload an image, but really you can upload anything. You just can't click and then select, because if I click this and it's going to upload my CSV or upload my file here, it's looking for images, but I don't want images. I want a CSV file. Specifically, I want on my desktop here, or my downloads, I think. Yeah, I want this contacts here, but I can't choose it because it's not selected. So what you do here is you don't select it, but rather you drag a file in. So I'm going to leave it here on that screen, and then I'm going to grab my contact file and just going to drag it in here. And it's going to upload, and it's not going to display anything because it's looking for an image. So, but now I just double click my image and change it back to text or URL. And now we see indeed we have a file that was uploaded to Glide's cloud server. And if I double click this, we see that indeed it ends in a .csv, which is kind of cool. All right, so now I can provide this template to my users. So in my layout, here's my contacts. I'm going to add a button to the title bar of this contacts here. So I'm going to go to actions. And if you were on default actions like this, you can just uncheck these and then enable advanced action and then add a primary action. And this primary action is going to be import. So I'm just going to go ahead and rename this to import, in this case, contacts. And we can give it an icon, something fun like this maybe. And we don't want to show notification. Instead, we want to show a new screen that points to our importer table. So I'm going to click show notification, type new, select show new screen. And we don't want to show this item. We want to show the data for our importer table, which is just a one column or a one row, helper table in our Glide table. And for our target, depends on what you want to display. You can either do slide in or overlay. Let's choose overlay like that. All right, click the button and now we have our screen. Ooh. All right, let's make this prettier. So we're going to give it a custom title of import contacts. Let's get rid of this collection. We don't need any breadcrumbs in an overlay. All right, and maybe we want to give our users like a sequence. Okay, so I'm going to add a title component here. And we'll say step 1, get rid of our image. We don't need an image. And our step 1 will be to download the CSV template. And we can provide them a button. So we can add an action down here and we'll say download. And we can give it a download icon. I think we have one. It's like a down arrow with a thing. Can I search for it? Do they have it? Download? Oh yeah, look at that. Cool. And then this is just going to be an open link. And the link we're going to open is not the upload file, but our template file. Okay, so they'll click on this, it'll open the CSV, then they can download it, whatever they need to do with it. All right, next we're going to give them a step 2. So add a separator. Let's duplicate my title. And we'll say step 2. And we don't need an action anymore on this. And we're going to say upload the completed CSV file. Okay, and we're going to give them a file picker component like this. And we're going to point to the upload file, which it did already, which is great. You can give it a different label if you want. I'll just leave it. It's fine. And then I'm going to keep the file name when uploading. And we are assuming that they're going to upload a CSV file, which means we need to check to make sure that they're not uploading something random like a PDF. Otherwise, our whole experience is going to break. So I'm going to go ahead and add a hint component here. And let's make this a danger hint component with a warning or an X label or something. And we can say invalid file type. Please upload a CSV file to continue. Now, how can we make sure it's a CSV file? Well, once they upload a file here, I'm going to go ahead and choose one from my desktop. I have a mock CSV file ready to go with 2,000 records in it. All right, we can see that the file here ends in a .csv, and just so you see it in the data editor, my upload file, if I double click, indeed it's a .csv. So we just only want to show, this hint component when, so add a visibility condition here, when the upload file, one is not empty. I want to make sure they upload something at all before they even see an error, right? but also when that upload file doesn't include .csv, right? So if they do like a PDF instead, they're going to see this error. But if they upload a CSV file like I did, then the error is not there. All right, so I have a CSV file. So then the step 3 will be to process it, right? So we can add a separator. And we'll add a step 3 for our title. And we will say import the completed CSV or the uploaded CSV file. And this will be where we come back to in order to actually process our file. All right, so let's see what this actually did. If I go to my data editor here, we can see that our uploaded file, right, ends in a .csv, which is great. But in order to see what the contents of the file are, we're going to use a nifty little column that Glide has. It's called web page source. And because our file here is actually living in Glide's cloud storage and it outputs a URL to that file, technically then it's a web page and we can use this column, which is kind of handy. So I'm going to let's see, I'm going to duplicate this and I'll say upload file copy. We're going to say upload. This will be CSV. And our type here is going to be, if I search for web, is this browser get web page source. So I'm going to click on this one here, this get web page source. And the web page that we're getting the source from is our file here. Now, if you see a button here that says like add browser, just click on add. I think I already did it earlier, which is why I'm not seeing the warning here. But then under URL, I'm going to point it to my upload file like this. And we can leave this part blank and our output type should be raw HTML because that way it will know kind of spaces and things like that. All right, hit save. And so now if I double click this CSV file, we see, boom, there's my 2000 records ready to be imported. One of the trickiest things to do with importing a CSV file is we have to make sure that the file that the user is importing, one is a CSV file, right, which we've already taken care of, but two, that the headers of that CSV file actually match the columns of our data table that we're importing into. Otherwise, we're going to have data going everywhere, right? So we need to make sure things are in the right order and so forth. So that's why we really want to make sure that they've imported that CSV file correctly. What we can do is compare the headers of those CSV files to see if they match. So what I need to do in this CSV file is extract just the header here, and we'll do the same thing in our template and then compare the two. All right, this is going to be a little involved. We have to add a couple of columns here to make this happen. One, we have to split our CSV by lines into an array and then grab just the first item from that array, which should be the header of our CSV file. All right, so to do that, I'm going to add a column to the right here. Really, I'm going to duplicate. That way it can save me some time with naming things. So it's going to be upload CSV copy. So now it's going to be our upload. We're going to call this array or CSV array. And we're going to use a split text column. And our text is going to be our upload CSV. Okay. And you see here it's starting to split naturally by comma, but we don't want that. We want to split by every line, right? So I'm going to get rid of that comma and then add a return character like this and then save. Okay, and now we see that our CSV file is now broken into array items. Now to get the first item, or really a single item from an array, is we use a single value column. So I'm going to duplicate this one here. We're going to call this upload and then CSV header. And instead of a split text, we're going to use a single value column. A single value picks out a single item from an array. So in this case, we're going to get the first, which is exactly what we want. We want the header, right? From our CSV array. Like that, and save. And if I double click this, we should see that it's just the header now. Great. So now I can compare this to the template file. So I have to add these 3 columns to my template, which is pretty easy. I'll just duplicate each of them, change upload to template, and just point it to the other column like that. We'll just drag this over. Okay, CSV array, again, duplicate. And again, this will be the template CSV. Let's get rid of that word copy. Okay, and lastly, we want the template header. So we'll duplicate this one. Template. And we're going to have the first from not the CSV array, but the template CSV array. And save. All right, and now we see that this value, which is the CSV file that I uploaded, and here's our header, right? And these two things hopefully match. So what we can do here is we can see, or we can add a column here, and we can say like matching, or upload matches template, and be an if then else. And we're going to say if the upload CSV header is the same thing as the template header, then true, else false. And there we go, matches the template, right? And so if it was false, then we can have another warning here to let them know that we have mismatching data. So again, we can make this danger icon, maybe like a warning this time. And we can say data mismatch. Make sure you're using the provided template. Right, and this will be when upload file is not empty and when upload matches template is not checked. Okay, but because they match, we're not seeing that. Great. Okay, so then the next bit here is we want to convert our CSV here to something that Glide can work with for uploading the data. The best thing we can do here is convert the CSV file into JSON. JSON is an organized data structure that nearly any API or computer application can read. And it's going to make looping over this information very easy. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a column to the right of our CSV, and we're going to say upload and then JSON. And our type is, if we search for JSON, we're going to get this neat CSV to JSON column. And we're going to add CSV. And our CSV string, as you think, will be our upload CSV. And I save. All right, so now if I double click this, we can see that it turned our CSV file into organized data. Right? And what's cool is that this data is very predictable. Now this JSON is almost ready. Really, we need to wrap this JSON into an object. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. I'm going to say JSON wrapped. And we're going to create this into a JSON object column. And the only thing we're going to do here is we're going to call this, let's call this data. And the data is going to be our upload JSON, like that. So we're popping this JSON bit into a JSON object column and organizing it into a data object. So we can see here that this raw, just kind of array value of items now is being defined as this data, then the array. Okay, this is going to help us later to do some operations onto it. Okay, so next, now that we have this JSON data, we need to take it and send it to a workflow so that our workflow can iterate over it and add all that data at once. Right, so in our layout here, for example, we're going to add a button here that's going to trigger that workflow. Now we want a manual workflow. It's kind of a new thing in Glide. If you haven't enabled it yet, what you need to do is head to your team folder here, go down to settings, scroll down. You see all these cool little things here. We're going to go ahead and add manual workflow triggers, this first one up here. Okay. And then this trigger workflow step, we'll add that one as well. So this first one is the ability to have a manually triggered workflow. The second one is to allow you to actually have an action to trigger this workflow. We'll talk about maybe these other ones in a later video. All right, back to our app. So if we head to workflows and create a new workflow, we now see that we can create a manual workflow, which is pretty cool. Okay, we can name this workflow import contacts. And the way that a manual workflow works is when you select it at the top here, you can add items that will be used in the workflow. So in this case, we want to add a few things. We want to add the signed in user. So this would be like user email. And it's going to be an email column. That way we know who is, running the workflow. And then next, we want to have our data. We'll call this, data is fine. And this is going to be JSON, like that. Okay, so now we need to trigger this workflow. So when I go to layout and our import contacts, I have to choose my file. Now we can add a button here. Let's make the button a little bit more bigger than this download button. A bit more obvious that that's what we're supposed to be doing here. And we'll say import. And we'll later add some conditions to this button to make sure that they can only import it when everything matches, right? But the option here is going to be a flow, trigger workflow. And the workflow that we're going to trigger is the one we just created, which is this import contacts, right? You see here the two items that we added to that workflow are user email, which will be our user profile email, and the data, which happens to be our upload, and then JSON wrapped like this. Okay, so when I click on import, right, it's going to trigger that workflow. Now the workflow is not really doing anything yet, but we see that if I go to my import contacts workflow, we see that it just ran a second ago. And if I click on it, we should see the data. We should see our email and those 2,000 records that are part of that CSV file. Right, so there's the one thing, and here's the second thing. All right, let's go back to our workflow here. Now, what I'm about to show you is only good if your users are uploading records of 1,000 records or less, because the Glide workflows only have a 1,000 operation limit at the moment. So we have to make sure that the count of records coming in are less than 1,000. So with that caveat, we can continue. At some point too, we can build in a checker to count how many rows there are, and again, prevent the user from uploading if the CSV file is bigger than 1,000 records for a later date. Okay, so we have this data coming in from our manual trigger. Okay, it's listed as data here. All right, so now we have to iterate over that data, and we can do that using a loop. And the loop we're going to use, the source here, is going to be not any particular table and nothing actually from our trigger, but instead we're going to use this numbers value at the top. And what that does is it gives you a start date or a start number and an end number, and then what to increment by. And so when working with JSON, our start value, our start line item will always be 0. And we're going to increment by 1 for as many rows as we have. And again, our max should be 1,000, but we don't want to give it 1,000. We should give it as many records as there are in the data. So to determine what that number is dynamically, before our loop, we can add an action, and we're going to choose data and then query JSON. And the JSON is going to be our trigger data, and we are going to count our data records. And so to do that, we just say $count, parentheses, and then data, like that. And that'll count then how many array items there are in that data array. Okay, so that'll be the number of records that we need to loop over. So next, we're going to configure our loop, again, to start at 0, increment by 1, all the way until our query JSON. And let's actually name this so we can refer to it easier. So we're going to say count records. And here we're going to say loop through records. Next, what we have to do is just take it one line at a time. This loop is going to keep track of where we're at in our JSON. We just have to tell the loop what item we want. So we're going to add another query JSON. Okay. The JSON again is our data record, which is our trigger data. That's the JSON coming in. All right, so in between these, we'll create a template column. This template column will be called JSON or query expression. And the template is the data square bracket. And in between the square brackets, we'll put some sort of variable. We'll just do like a number sign. And then we're going to add a replacement where that number sign is the loop number. Right? So it's be like data 0, data 1, data 2, data 3, as it keeps looping through here. And then we're going to use this JSON expression in our query JSON. So we'll select it in the query JSON column like this. Okay, and that should give us then each line item of our JSON. All right, so then now we just have to pull out the values that we want from the JSON. Okay, so if we head back to our data, right, we can see exactly what this JSON is going to look like this. So we have ID, first name, last name, email. So these are all of the values that we want to pull out so we can write them as a new row. So I'm going to just copy this just so I can refer to it later. You can also take a screenshot of it if you like. Maybe I'll do that too. Let's have that live over here while we work on our workflow. Okay. And in our query JSON, after our query JSON, we then need to pull out each of these items. So all of these will also be query JSONs. So this one we'll rename to be current record. Then after that, we are going to do a query JSON of the current record. And we are going to pull out each of these items. So we want to pull out the ID, right? So we'll call this ID. And then we'll duplicate this. And we'll call this first name, where our item here is first name. And I think you have to use backticks. Okay, and so on and so forth through all of these. And then eventually we want to add a row. So we're going to click on the plus here, and we're going to go data add row. And we're going to add a row to our contacts table. And we're going to select from each of these values the ones that we're querying. So the ID number will be our ID, and then first name will be first name, yada, yada, right? Our owner will be our trigger user email, and our timestamp will be the current date and time. All right, so before I go through all of this, I want to make sure I test it first with just a couple of different items here. And I don't want to loop through all of my records. So for now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change my repetitions from count records to just like 3. And then give this a test. And so hopefully what this does is it adds 3 line items to my table. Let's see if it works. All right, so I'm going to go back to my layout. Let's close this. Let's bring this off to the side here for now. And we see my CSV file still there. I'm going to say import. And let's see if it actually does it or if I'm going to get an error. Let's go back to my workflow. It says just now. It's going to loop through those items. And hopefully I don't see any red. If I see any red, it's probably something to do with this querying of the JSON right here. Otherwise, we should see 3 new contacts in my contacts table. There it goes. And in my contacts, data, contacts, look at that. We have ID numbers and first names and owners and timestamps. It's glorious. Okay, let's go ahead and delete these. Let's go back to my workflow. All right, so now that we know that it works, in my loop through records here, I'm going to change my repetitions back to count records. And now I'm going to finish doing more of these query JSONs. Again, I'm just going to duplicate each of these, right? Rename them to what it is that we're adding, and then just make sure that the key that we are exporting here matches the column that matches in our database. I'm going to do this now. We'll come back in just a second. All right, I've added all of the items, and so now let's see how long it takes us to add all 2,000 records in the layout here. So on our import contact screen, besides just doing the trigger workflow, I should probably also do a few things like close down this overlay, maybe display notification, something. So what we can do here is click on our action and convert this trigger workflow to a new workflow like this. It's going to retain that trigger, which is here, which is nice. I'm just going to rename this to trigger import contacts. And then after it imports the contacts, I'm going to then close an overlay and then show a notification. And that notification can be contacts importing. Please be patient because it might take a while. All right, and then done. All right, let's see how this works. I'm going to click on import. It should close this screen down. I sit back and I just kind of wait and see, and hopefully that we have contacts importing here. There we go. And you can see that it's looping through and it's taken a minute, right? So yes, it's importing these kind of one at a time, right? Which means when it goes to loop through 2,000 records, or 1,000 in this case, right? Yeah, it's going to take a while, right? But you can see that it's actually working with fidelity. All right, so we now have this experience where we can import contacts and upload a CSV file, import it, and it'll do that one line item at a time. Now we should probably also clear this file. So let me go ahead and adjust our workflow here. Besides closing the overlay, we can also set a column value to clear our upload file. Be careful you don't accidentally clear the template file. We want to make sure that stays intact for our users. And so that way it'll clear it for next time. Okay, so right now we're at 81 records after a couple of minutes. So yeah, you can see that it's going to take a minute. All right, I'm going to head over to my workflows, and we can see this thing is still running. I'm going to cancel it so that way I don't eat up a bunch of updates while I'm testing things out here. Got a warning, which is fine. So after 2 minutes of operations, it uploaded 134 records, right? So again, it's a bulk experience, but it's kind of slow, and it just ate up 134 updates to my app. So if we have lots of users who are uploading CSV files, this is not very cost effective for us as a user. This would only be used in like small batches. We don't want them uploading hundreds or thousands of items using this method. Okay, a better method, especially when you have lots of data that you want them to upload, and where you're uploading to a Glide Bigtable, is to use a technique called stashing. Stashing is a feature that's part of Glide's API version 2. Just so you see what this is, I'm going to open up a new tab here. We're going to go to Glide API version 2, which is apidocs.glideapps.com. And we see our version 2 API. And this is specifically for Glide Bigtables. Okay, so you can use this API with Glide Bigtables. And the one cool thing about this API is that this thing called stashing, which is used for large data sets, we're talking like hundreds or thousands of records. Right? Stashing is just like the name implies, it means you're taking a subset of records and then pocketing them away, okay, into a stash, and then eventually that stash is uploaded via the API all at once. And so the stash limit is about 500 to 1,000 records or so. You can really pick anything you want. Pick a number that's easy for you. I might do 1,000 records at a time here. And what you can do here is you send like 1,000 records at a time to a stash, and then you send the whole stash, and then it uploads all 2,000 records near instantaneously, which is going to be a whole lot faster. And it's cheaper because you only pay one update for every 100 records. So instead of costing 2,000 updates, instead it's only going to be 20 updates, which is much more cost effective, especially if you have a bunch of users uploading stuff all at the same time. Okay, so the way the stashing works is it's through this put API. Well, I want to walk you through this. It's going to look kind of scary. It's okay. We'll walk you through it. But we're going to use this put API to create that JSON array that we had earlier. We're going to chunk it, okay, into chunks of 1,000 records or so. And then we're going to put each 1,000 records at a time into a stash using a stash ID, which we'll create on the fly. That's no big deal. And then eventually we're going to add rows to table using the post API here, but we're going to include the stash as that object. So somewhere in here, yes, we're going to include the stash as the item in this post. Okay, so we're using two different endpoints using the Glide API. Now, if you've never used the Glide API before, this can all look a little scary, but I'm going to walk you through it. Just hang tight. Okay, let's go back to our Glide app. And the first thing we have to do here is go back to our importer table. Okay, and we need to do a couple of things. Okay, the first thing is that the stash wants column IDs. Right now, what we've been doing is parsing out the names of items here, so the names of the column headers, but the stash can't recognize what those are. We have to get the IDs of these columns, and the IDs can be found in the table that we're importing to. Right? And if I right click on it and go to show API, we're going to go to curl and add rows. Okay, we can see what these ID numbers are. I'm going to go ahead and copy these. Okay. And let's back out. Okay, we're also going to need this native table at some point, this table ID, which is fine. All right, next in our importer table, okay, we have to then convert our CSV file with these regular column headers. We need to take these and convert them into the IDs of the contacts table. So what I found is probably one of the easiest ways to do this is to use a little bit of AI. And we don't want to put AI on this entire 2000 record CSV file. It's way too much for the AI to handle, I think. So instead, we're just going to point the AI column to our CSV header, which is only one record. All right, so we're going to add a column to the right of our CSV header, and we're going to call it upload prompt. Okay, and our prompt will just be a template column. It could also be a text column, I guess, but we'll just do template column. Now I already have our prompt crafted on a different window. I'm going to go ahead and paste it in here. All right, so the prompt that I came up with that seems to work pretty reliably is this one here. We're going to recreate the CSV header based on the JSON. We're going to be conservatively lenient with some of the headers. For example, we're going to give the AI an example here. Like email address can map to email, right? And like surname can point to last name, etc. If you want to be even more lenient, you can just give it more examples, like ID can go to ID number, street address can go to address, etc. Okay, and then I said CSV headers must retain the original sort order. So we want to make sure that everything is in the same order. Okay, but instead of the CSV headers, we want to make sure we're using the left-hand IDs instead. So instead of these values in the CSV, we want to use these values instead. Okay, then I always wrap up my AI prompts with no explanation terse output, just to make sure it's not giving me an explanation. Like, sure, here's the thing you asked for. I hate that with AI. I just want to just give me the stuff, right? Okay, and then there's no replacements. We'll hit save. Okay, so then here's the item. And then now we're going to add a column to the right. This will be an upload. And then we're going to call this new CSV header. And it's going to be an AI column. So we're going to use Glide's AI, generate text. Okay, our instructions will be our prompt. So our upload prompt. And the input will be our upload CSV header. And then save. Okay, there we go. Now we have, instead of our CSV header with readable IDs, we have the column IDs that match our context table. All right, so then next we have to replace our CSV header here with that one. So how do we do that? Well, we have our CSV array. So now we need to pick out everything but the first line item of our CSV array, because we don't want this header, we want the new header. Okay, so to do that, to get rid of this header out of the array, what we can do is we can do a remove element. So to the right of CSV array, I'm going to add a column to the right, and we're going to call it upload. We're going to say CSV body. Type is going to be a remove element column. The values are going to be our upload CSV array, right? So that's everything. And so what are we removing? We're going to remove the original CSV header that we've already have in our single value column. So we're going to remove our upload original CSV header and then save. And so now you see that our array just contains the first record. It doesn't have any of the headers on top of that. Okay, so then now all we have to do is just like Frankenstein our CSV back together again. Okay, so we have our CSV body of the array. We have our new CSV header. So now we're just going to need a new CSV. To do that, we're going to use a make array column. So I'm going to add a column to the right here. We're going to choose upload. And it's going to be an array still. So we'll call this new CSV array. We're going to use a make array column. I love the make array column. We need two items. The first item will be our new header. So we're going to do triple dots, upload new CSV header. Okay. And then we're going to add to it our CSV body. So upload CSV body, like that. All right, so now we have a new CSV array. So now we have to put it back into a CSV string. So we're going to duplicate that, and we're just going to call it new CSV without the array part. And to turn an array into a string, we use a join text column. We're using all the fun columns today, aren't we? So we're going to choose the join list column, and we're going to join the values in our new CSV array like that. And we want to separate them by a line break like this. So I'm going to put our array items back on their own line. Hit save. And so now we have our CSV array like we had before, but now it has item IDs instead of the readable name. Okay, so now that we have this, now we can form JSON off of this value. Okay, so we're going to, just to kind of keep things clean here, I'm going to create a new column grouping. Let's do a duplicate, and we're going to call this for stashing. We'll just call this stashing, and we'll call this JSON. And this is going to be a CSV to JSON column, which we've already used before, right? Our CSV to JSON, and our CSV string is going to be our new CSV, like that. We hit save. All right, and now look. Now we have the same CSV as we had before, right? But instead, now we have it with the IDs, which is what the stashing API needs. Okay, just like before, we need to wrap this as well. So we'll duplicate this. We'll call this JSON wrapped. Be a JSON object column. And again, we're going to point to our stashing JSON, and we'll just use the term data like that. Okay, so now we have a data object with 2,000 records in here. See, it just kind of keeps going on forever. Now this data array has 2,000 records in it. That's way too much for stashing purposes. Your stashes should really be anywhere between like 100 and 1,000 records at a time. We'll just do 1,000 records. That way we only need 2 chunks for the single stash. Okay, and the only way to really do that is to use some JavaScript. Okay, so I just popped what I was looking for into ChatGPT, or pick your AI engine of preference, and I gave it some specific instructions, and it came out with some JavaScript code, which I will share with you here. It's going to also be in the description below, so you can copy and paste it right from there in case you don't want to have to just pause the video and type. All right, so I'm going to add a column to the right here. We're going to call this stashing, and let's call this chunked JSON. It's going to be a JavaScript. Okay, and the JavaScript code, I'm just going to paste it in like this. Now, you don't need to know what any of this really does. However, there are a couple of things that you'll want to edit in this JavaScript for your specific app. The first thing is the very first line here, where it is specifying how many records do you want in each chunk of data. I'm doing 1,000 records at a time, but you can either do like 100 or 500 or 250 or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to do 1,000 records at a time here. Okay. The next thing here is that you're going to want to change these IDs. So these 2 IDs, one goes to the current timestamp, and the other one's going to be the email column. You're going to want timestamp and email in your destination table. Okay, so these 2 IDs need to match to timestamp and email. So if I go back to my contacts table, actually let's save this first. Save. All right, contacts table, and show my API. Okay, and do my add row. We see that I have these 2 values for my owner, which is the email, and this value as timestamp. All right, so I believe that these 2 values don't even match the ones that I had in that JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy these. Okay, go back to my importer. Go back to my JavaScript here. So So our current timestamp and our static email. I'm going to give a couple of lines so I have something to work with. All right, so our email was this one instead. So I'm going to cut that and put it over here. And then this one must have been our timestamp. So I'm going to cut that and put it over here. And then let's get rid of all this stuff. Okay, and then I want to replicate that over here as well. So this here, and then this one down here. All right, so whatever your IDs are for your columns, just make sure you put them in the JavaScript likewise here. All right, and then lastly, to finish up our JavaScript column, we need two values, P1 and P2. P1 is the JSON, that chunked JSON, or is the JSON wrapped. So for P1, go to stashing and then JSON wrapped. And then P2 is going to be our email address of the app's user. Okay, we also needed to wrap them in quotes because these values can't start with numbers otherwise. So now that they're in quotes, we hit save. And now we have chunked JSON. Now, if just you see how this is working, if I were to change the chunk size to, let's say, 10 items, and then save, and I double click this, we can see that my array of items, now after every 10 items, here's my 10th item here, right? We see that it goes through and eventually it closes that array with another square bracket here, and then starts a new array at 11. So I'm chunking my array into arrays of a designated value. And each of those arrays, each of those chunks, we put into a stash when we call the API. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set this back to 1,000. Okay, and then save. So this chunked data is the only piece of data that we need to send to our new workflow. All right, so we're going to start from scratch. We're going to create a new workflow here. In our workflows table, we have our import contacts. Let's change the name of this so we don't get confused. This import contacts is import contacts manual. Okay, and next we're going to create a new import contacts stashing. We can maybe just duplicate this and just change it. So we're going to say import contacts stashing. Okay, our trigger here for manual is still, we need a user email, and we still need our data, just like this. Okay, we're still going to do a count. Okay, we're going to count our trigger data. Okay, the only thing is that we don't need to reference data anymore because our chunked records don't have that identifier. So we instead just put a $sign in there. So that's our JSON add column. And that's going to give us how many chunks we have to go through. Next, we need to create a unique stash ID. As part of the Glides API here, you see that when we go to put items into a stash, we need to create a stash ID and then a serial. So the stash ID is a unique value that we can create. And the serial is only necessary if those items have to be in the same order. Okay, the stash ID is going to be a unique value, and we can create a unique value using a template column. So in between my count records and my loop, I'm going to add a new action. We're going to search for template. Okay, we're going to rename this to be stash ID. And our value here is going to be anything like an @sign. And I'm going to replace that @ with a unique value. So Glide is going to come up with a brand new value for me that I'm going to use as part of this stash. All right, next. My loop through records is going to be the same thing. I'm still going to do my count records. It's still going to start at 1 and increment by 1. Okay, but our query is going to change slightly. Okay, you're going to see that we actually need less steps here, which is nice. Okay, so our query expression, okay, is going to be not data then number, but really because we're not using data, so we're going to replace the word data with just a $sign, and we can leave this alone, the number and the number here. Okay, And then we only need one query JSON, believe it or not. So all of these that we did before, we're going to trash, because we're not parsing out individual records anymore. We're only ever parsing out each line item in our chunk. And we don't need an add row anymore either. We're not using that value. Okay, so we have our record. Okay, and then this query JSON is still going to be our trigger, and we're still going to point it to the query expression here. Okay, and then what that's going to do, it's going to grab that whole first chunk of data, which is going to be our first 1,000 records or so, and we're going to put that into a stash. Okay, so we're going to add a new action, and to put an action, or to put a chunk into a stash, we need to use the call API feature. So I'm going to search for API and do call API. Okay, and then our endpoint we're going to craft. It's going to be HTTPS, and then we can probably just find it over here. It's going to be this bit right here, right? So stashes, and then the stash ID like this. I'm going to go ahead and copy this, come back over here, and we'll just paste that like this. Okay. And then for the stash ID, we're going to replace that with the value of our stash ID. Okay. Okay, then our serial, if we want to, can just be our loop record, right? So we can do our / and then our loop through records here, like this. All right, what's our method? I believe it's a put. Yep, it's a put method. So we'll change get to put. Okay, then we need a couple of headers here. So we're going to add a couple of values in our headers. The first one is our authorization. Make sure you spell it right. Authorization, which is bearer, and then our bearer ID, which I'm going to grab in just a minute. And the other type is here is content type. So content dash type. And then it's going to be application JSON. Okay, again, these you could have found these also as part of the API call here, part of your headers. Okay. Okay, you can find your API key really anywhere. If I do show API here, we can do copy secret token. It doesn't matter which table, it's all the same token. So I'm going to copy that token, go back to my workflow, and then in my API here, I'm going to paste it in here. No looking. Okay, so that's my token hiding somewhere, and there's more than just the 5 characters, so I'm safe. Okay, and then what we're going to send as part of that stash is this current record. All right, so I'm going to go into the triple dots here and then select current record, just like that. Okay, so it's going to loop through all of my chunks and put them into the stash. And then the last bit here is to put them all at once into our table. And the call API that we need here is going to be that other endpoint, which is going to be the add row action here, this add rows to table. Okay, so this is our new endpoint. So I'll copy that. We need a new call API. I'll go ahead and paste that into the endpoint here. Okay, the only thing I need to change is that it's asking for my table ID. Okay, so to find the table ID, we're going to go back to our data column, go to contacts. So then in my case, it's contacts. Right click and show API. Okay, and then here's the table ID. It's the part that comes after native table. So it's going to be starting, for me, it's starting with this F, you got it all the way to the 7. So I'm going to copy that, head back to my workflow, and paste that in instead of this table ID, like that. Okay, so now the endpoint knows which table we're writing to. Okay, in this case, our method is a post request. Okay, it's going to need all the same things. It's going to need those same 2 headers. All right. And then we should also include an error handling. So they do have this error handling value available to us. And we go to add things from stashing, this on schema error, right? And then what I like to do is do the drop columns. So what that means is that when you go to add a row to a table, right? If there's data coming in from the stash that doesn't line up with any columns that are in the table, it'll just ignore them then, right? So that's kind of a nice little feature. So I'm going to choose this on schema error drop columns, plural. Okay, so for our on schema error drop columns. All right, and lastly, we need a body. We need to send it to. We need to send that stash. Now we kind of have to wrap our stash in some JSON here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a value in before this call API. It's going to be a JSON object like this. I think it's dollars. I think it's just $ stash ID like this. So $ stash ID. Is that right? Yeah. $ stash ID and then whatever the ID number is. Okay. So $ stash ID and the value here is our stash ID that we created way over here like that. All right. So this is our JSON body. I'll rename that. And this API call is to add rows. And the body is our JSON body like this. I think that's it. So this will get us where we need to go in order to add the rows. And then maybe we can do some fancy things after this. I just make sure that this works. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to change our trigger import contacts, right? So instead of triggering the manual, we're going to disable that one. And we'll duplicate and then enable. But this one's going to be import contacts stashing. And so we're going to trigger the other workflow we just created. And we have to send our stashing chunked JSON. And then close the overlay and then do all the things. Okay, so just so we can see how fast this works. In my contacts, remember it took 2 minutes to upload 134 records. I'm going to delete these 134 records. Okay, and with any luck, when we go to import contacts here, okay, it should upload these 2,000 records almost instantly with the stashing. Fingers crossed, here we go, import. What do we think? Is it working? It's got to do those 1,000 records, then another 1,000 records, and then it should just go boop and put them in. Let's make sure our workflow worked. So trigger columns. Oh, well, you know what? It would help if I enabled my workflow. Let's try that again. Okay, so import contacts. I got to choose my file again. Now we have that thing where it's clearing. All right, so with any luck, when we hit import, we should have 2,000 records added directly to our glide table nearly instantly. Sit back, let's see, import, fingers crossed, drum roll, all the things. And look at that, we have all of our contacts. So we have 21 pages times 23. That's gonna be about 2,000. Oh, okay, we keep going. We have 84 pages. So yeah, there's our 2,000 records. And that happened nearly instantly. And the best part is that those 2,000 records only cost us 20 updates. So absolutely amazing, right? All right, so then the only thing is that you might have to do some error troubleshooting a bit. For example, sometimes the table ID that you see here with the show API, like this table ID, doesn't actually match the ID that Glide recognizes it as. So there is an API here called list tables, which This is the endpoint, just api.glideapps.com/tables. You throw in your authorization bearer token in there, and then it'll list out the tables that you have as part of your team folder. So what I did to really just make sure that I could identify that table, because I might have more than one app that has the word contacts in it, was I renamed my table to unroped contacts. I just created a simple schedule workflow, which calls that API with my authorization token. I ran it, and what that did was that it then listed out all of my data tables and their IDs, right? And I found out that my unroped contacts here, right? This ID that it gave me was actually a different ID than what was in the data editor. Sometimes it matches, sometimes it doesn't. So if it doesn't and you get an error, like a 404 error, that's the reason why. You can run this API, find the actual ID that Glide is kind of hiding in the back end here, and use that in your call to add rows via stashing this one down here at the bottom. So yes, this is a fairly advanced concept to be able to take a CSV file and allow your users to import that data directly into the Glide database. But man, is it worth it. It's going to save your users time, so they don't have to add those records one at a time. It's also going to save you money by using the stashing API, because it's going to be pennies on the dollar for only one update for every 100 records that you're adding, rather than a one-to-one if they were adding via a form, or if they were using looping over a workflow like we saw in the first part of this video. All right, so if you have any questions at all about any of the concepts that you saw here today, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out via the comments below, the Glide community forums, or find me at socials at rpetito or robert@unropedapps.com. And as always, thanks for watching.